important. Um, what do we mean, first of all, by bilingual?
Well, I think there are probably as many definitions as there are people in some ways. Everybody has their own perception of what that term means. So perhaps the most important thing to do in bilingual education is for people to agree on what that term means for them in their context. Because I've certainly met lots of people in life who've spoken to me through the medium of their second or third language and tell me that they're not bilingual, yet from my perspective they're absolutely bilingual. So generally speaking, a bilingual is a person that is able to use two or more languages for communication on a regular basis and for engaging in intercultural communication.
Well, this leads us on to bilingual education. What do you mean by that?
Well, once again, I think it's very important to agree on that term with the various stakeholders, because once one has agreed on the term, one has a sense of what it is that one can achieve. So from my perspective, bilingual education, in bilingual education, two or more languages are used for the teaching of various content subjects, such as mathematics, history, and geography. And ideally, this throughout the last years, at least throughout the last years of a student's education. But that's not sufficient as a definition, because I think it's important to have some really strong objectives that are tied to it. I think it's also important to state that bilingual education seeks to have students develop their first language, their mother tongue, and to ensure that that continues to develop. It's important in bilingual education that the L2, or the second language, is also developed at an age-appropriate level. Furthermore, in bilingual education, one would not want to put a student in a situation where they're learning less content. So one of the goals is to ensure that that is a rich learning environment where the students are learning just as much content in maths classes or science classes as students would in a monolingual program. Then it's also important that students develop an understanding of the cultures that are involved. Not only an understanding, but an appreciation for those cultures. I think it's also important for students to have developed the habits, the interest in and the habits of intercultural communication. Because ultimately we're learning to speak a second language so that we can communicate, so that we have that resource, and if we have that resource, we should be using it. And finally, I would say it's important that students develop the basic thinking skills, the habits of mind, the learning skills that they need for lifelong learning. Because if one hasn't thought through all of those things, then it's difficult to actually plan one's program.